Imagine being a small child and asking your mom for an apple, but nothing comes out. No words, no way of communicating, and it never changes. For decades, you're locked in the body that also doesn't listen to you and essentially does what it wants. Imagine being the mother of this child, having a son she loves greatly, who won't look at her, shuns her touches, and explodes in random movements and chaotic actions. Imagine the pain and anguish and exhaustion that goes with this. Two people desperately needing love, both trapped by the inability to explain their pain, and both asking where God is. This is a story of Katie Asher and her son Houston. She has written an incredible book titled The Book of Heaven, a story of hope for outcasts, the broken, and those who have lost faith. It's a story of how God worked through a severely autistic son and a mother who lost hope and faith to redeem and unite them and bring a miracle beyond imagination. It is a story of true love, uniting, persistent, undying love between a mom and a son and between God and these two. And love prevailed. This is the story that Katie has written, and I'm so grateful, Katie, to have you with us on the Be Life podcast. This is our 84th or 85th episode, and I couldn't be more excited for this time with us. Your story is incredible. You are. I have fallen in love with you and your son, and I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you actually taking the time to read our story, because it's hard to understand the depth of its importance if you don't know the details. And the details are important.
And the details are painful at
They are.
times. I told you there were points, and I'm being very honest, where it was hard, it was tedious, because I'm like, when is the sun going to break through here?
Right.
When is it going to end? And I told you that when I called you. I said, Katie, I don't think I can tell this story. It's too hard. Yeah. And you were saying, you have to keep reading.
Yeah.
You have to keep seeing beyond that. And and I did.
And Joe, I think that's such the story of life, right? That we have to keep seeing beyond. We have to keep persevering. We have to keep going. We can't stop where it's difficult, and we can't get stuck there. We've got to have that faith that pushes us to keep going through the worst of it.
That is so true. It's like life. And the book was like that. I was living your life, and it was painful. And then all of a sudden, light broke through. And all of a sudden, I could live what you're living and what Houston is living. May I take a couple minutes and just share some of the reviews that people wrote about your book? This gives,
absolutely.
and the only reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to, hopefully it's not boring, but I want to do this because I want people to understand what people who have read this have said. I know what I wrote and what I thought, but one person wrote, "This book will completely change the way you think and expand your view on God." That is so true. Are you struggling to see God working in your life and feel like he isn't there? This book will show you that he absolutely is there. And then this is interesting. The first half is about Katie Asher's entire life, which is true. and it is completely gut-wrenching and heart-shattering, and will probably shed tears, and I added, and many will find it hard to read. I think it's true.
Yes.
At that point, I honestly could not believe the things she has gone through. This is a person reading this. She's constantly asking God, where are you? And it goes on and on. And then the second half. Now, I have to tell people while we're on this is a 2-part podcast because there is no way we can fit this story and do it justice in one podcast. So the first part of this podcast is this one right here, where we are going to talk with Katie about her life, about everything that led up to the birth of Houston, and then through the first, 2 decades of
Yes.
life with him and with your other 4 children.
Yes.
And then next week or next 2 weeks, we will get into Houston telling his story through spelling it out.
Yes. And he is the teacher for
And
sure.
he is the teacher, and it is unbelievable. You will hear directly from him, and we will take quotes that he has given from the book. But the whole second part of the book, Houston is telling his story. And folks, I'm telling you, it is absolutely spirit-boggling and mind-boggling.
I think he does the most magnificent job of destroying every single construct that we have that puts God in a box,
Oh,
because
yeah.
he is not in one at all.
No, and we're going to get into all this, and here's another one that somebody wrote, and I want you to. Another incredible thing that has happened is the kids whose parents ordered the book have reported incredible experience of their child knowing the truth and hope in the book. Several parents reported that a non-speaking child brought them the book to make them read it. And then
Yes.
sitting still for hours at a time listening to it. It was like Houston is communicating through the book to these other kids who can't communicate.
And I think there was something so incredible about this. First of all, there's this knowing that the kids know what's in the book before they've read it or their parents have read it. Like, they just instinctively know what the book is about. They know
Wow.
the hope that's within the book, and they won't let it go. Hope is so vital and important to them that it becomes something that they force their bodies to restrain and control their bodies just to be in the presence of the book or to hear the book. And I shared this story with you as well. One non-speaker, the mom told me, this is right at the beginning, right after I had it published, and it was like, I didn't know that this was going to happen, that people were going to have this reaction. And she said her 7-year-old, non-speaking 7-year-old, brought her the book in the package, and she said he's never done anything like this before. I said, well, that's amazing. Then I get a second email, and at this point she's been reading, and she asked her non-speaking son, not expecting an answer, do you see God? Do you see angels? And he spoke and said, yes, the book of heaven. And she's like sitting there in total shock. And then
Oh,
he actually took her hand and walked her to her bedroom, where she had an embroidered plaque on the wall, and pointed to it. And what the plaque said that she had embroidered, without ever really thinking, giving it much thought, was heaven here, today, tomorrow, forever.
wow.
And
Wow.
that's what he pointed to.
Yeah. I mean, that
Oh,
I
and
read,
another one of those stories was when a 39-year-old, because a lot of times people think it's just little kids. It
yes.
is not. A 39-year-old non-speaking woman who'd been basically abandoned by her family and was in a caregiver's, care in a home. This caregiver brought her to church, and there was a dad trying to tell the caregiver about letterboards. because he had a non-speaker, and he was just at the beginning of his journey with spelling with his children. He has two non-speakers, and the woman, the caregiver, is telling the father, oh, she can't read and she can't spell.
Mm.
And they're having this conversation, and he's trying to say, oh, but they can. That's what I thought too. He's trying to say all this. And the caregiver is just, she doesn't believe it, because we just tend to believe what we see. That we
Right.
think that's the limit.
Right.
And this non-speaking 39-year-old woman begins calling out letters. It's the only thing she can get out is letters. And suddenly the caregiver stops in shock and says, oh my goodness, she's spelling my name.
Wow.
And I imagine the effort of that woman trapped in her body, who was like, what can I possibly get out of my mouth to convince this woman that I can spell, that I am in her? And
Mm.
it was the woman's name.
Mm.
It is so profound. And when that father brought her a book, she refused to let it go. She wouldn't let, she was like embracing it and holding it. He sent me a picture. She would not let go of it.
It's like life. It's like you've sent them a lifeline.
Yes.
God has.
Yes.
Through you.
God let me be a participant in
Yes.
giving them a direct line to hope.
Yes. I mean, the whole thing, it's time and time again. I read this. You wrote this, I think. Oh no, someone wrote, this has been the most profound and life-changing book I have ever read outside the Holy Scripture. I am a mom of special needs children and don't have a lot of downtime, which you know, or extra energy to pour into things, but I could not put the book down. I finished it within a couple weeks, waking up early and staying up late to read it through eyes that were burning with exhaustion. I have recommended this book to everyone, and it goes on and on. Houston tells his mom, and she is one of the greatest writers of all time, and I wholeheartedly agree. It is really an amazing book. I want to ask you this to start out. Most of us, and this is what I got out of the book so profoundly. And I'm going to tell you what, the Holy Spirit has been working in my life, bringing joy after reading this and spending time with you. I'm seeing this now too. And I don't have a special needs child or anything like that. But I am experiencing a whole different level of spirituality thanks to you. And I'm going to say this. Most of the time, we see life, we separate life, the natural and the spiritual.
True.
And we live in this world in between. But the natural, because we can touch it and feel it and see it, we think it's more real than the spiritual.
Correct.
A lot of times. And what I got from your book is we forget that God's hands are in all of it, and that the physical is nothing more than energy and atoms and not at all what it seems.
Correct. And what's funny is that the material that we think is what's real is actually only the slowest and densest forms of energy. And what I came to realize later on in the book was that mass and energy are actually the same thing. They're just measured in different ways. And our senses are only capable of perceiving 4%. But the other 96% exist, even if we can't perceive it with our senses. And we even know about other animals and other metrics that can detect things that we can't perceive. But we've developed a philosophy that is based only on what we can perceive and reason.
Yeah.
And that's insufficient.
And the other part is that when you see it, you start seeing it as you're seeing it, and as a severely autistic person often sees it, like Houston.
Yes.
He sees this combination, it's all God.
All of it. Yes.
And we see it as, oh, we're going to handle I'm going to pray now, and I'll be in the spiritual realm, and I'm going to read scripture, and I'm going to be, but then I'm going to go back to the natural world, and then I'm going to have these two separate worlds. Well, Houston doesn't see it like that, and he's taught you this.
Correct.
Is that it's all one.
All of
It's
it.
all one.
And the other thing that people need to realize, because so many people think that they can just live a physical, material life, and that, oh, yeah, one day I'll deal with my spirit.
Yeah.
Not recognizing the duality that it's constantly going on, and one always affects the other, and that the source is actually spiritual. We think that somehow the material creates the spiritual, and it's the opposite. The spiritual
Amen.
creates the material.
Yeah. And it changes our whole perspective on who Jesus Christ is, or who God is, and what he has done. I wanted to start out, I told you the story. Let's go back and tell your story now.
Sounds good.
And you admitted your early life was, I said it was hard to read. I told you that. And it was hard for you to live because.
It was hard for me to write as well, because I didn't want to read it.
Yes. But you started out just a full of life, wonderful, knowing God, I believe.
Yes.
Just full of life, and over time that was stolen from you. It was taken from you. Go ahead and explain.
I was I was such a very joyful child, and my parents got divorced very early in my life, and I found, or I should say, God found me very early in my life. And whenever I was first introduced to the gospel, it was very simple. It was just as you would hear it as a child, that God had this amazing gift to give, and it was his son. And here's everything he offered, and here's what you have to do: be his. And it was so simple. I was like, well, that's easy. He belongs to me, I belong to him. That's what I'm going to do with my life. And I was filled with joy and love. And shortly after that, my father remarried, and he made a very poor choice in who he remarried. And this person was intent on destroying me. Really destroying my father as well. And she spent every single moment of her life crushing me and crushing my dad. And my dad didn't want to get another divorce, and so he let it happen. He let me be destroyed. She took everything that you can take from a child. She took my mother. She didn't allow my mother to be in my life. She took all of my mother's family. She really took most of my dad's family. She took my name. She took every single thing I was interested in. She wouldn't allow me to participate in. I was punished and grounded and abused and emotionally abused to the point of hopelessness. And at that point, I still had this faith, and I was trying to live out the Beatitudes. I was trying to love my enemy. I was trying to, and the verse that held me together during all that time was Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And the way I translated that as a child was, when something horrible would happen, I would go to God and I would say, and this too, you're going to work this too. And I don't have to be afraid, and I don't have to let this destroy me, because you're going to work this good too, for good too. And that was my mindset. What happened over time was the sheer mass of it. As there was so much, I began to really question if he was hearing me, if he was going to be true to that promise. And I became despondent that I loved him and he didn't love me, because he wasn't caring or protecting me. And it was that state of survival that I became entrenched in. Was God might not save me, but I will save myself.
Right.
And that's where I was by the end of my childhood. And it's very bad. I don't want anyone to not be aware of that. I try to be extremely upfront that it's incredibly traumatic and you wonder how a child can continue to go on. But I did. I left home right after I turned 18 with nothing and no one. And I thought, because I was a very good student, I thought that education was going to save me. And so I went to school. I had a full scholarship, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a great student and rescue myself. And instead, I found my own sin and mistakes and wanting to be accepted and wanting love and making really poor choices in that pursuit. And that got me in some very bad situations, including sexual assault, shaming, real abandonment, poverty, and to the point that I couldn't even pursue my education anymore because what people don't realize about that kind of, especially sexual assault, is you forget who you are. It's almost like you're cut off from the person that you are, and as if the shame itself won't let you be a good person anymore.
You weren't worthy.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's how I felt. And so then I was in this really precarious situation where I was like, I guess I'm not supposed to be a good person. I guess I'm supposed to be this other kind of person. But if you thought I was bad at being good, I was really bad at being bad. Um, I was like, who am I? I couldn't even get being a bad girl right. And I also couldn't get God out of my heart. He was still there. And I still loved him. And it still bothered me deeply when I saw bad things or when bad things were done to me. I couldn't stop being affected by that because he was still in my heart. And who he is and what he loves was still in my heart. But I felt as if this person he had called me to be was impossible to be. And it was in this environment that I became pregnant and and I knew, just so everybody knows, I knew he was not a good guy. That was very obvious. But I was told by all the adults that were peripherally in my life that you made your bed, you lie in it. No one's going to help you. Your only choice is to get married. And I did not want to, but I knew that was, if I was going to financially survive, that was my only choice. And so I did. And almost immediately, literally immediately, it probably had never even paused. He was already sleeping with other women, but my situation hadn't changed. I was still broke with no opportunities and pregnant. So I was still stuck. And I stayed and I had this baby girl. And I never knew when she was born, I never knew that I could love another human being that much. And at that point, I was like, well, you can do whatever. I'm loving her. Like, this is my purpose. And I didn't care about school. I didn't care about ambition. I didn't care about anything but this baby. And she was perfect. And when I got pregnant very quickly after she was born, it was, one of those things where you're like, I'm not sure what I was supposed to, like, how that was supposed to, I'm not really sure, but I immediately became pregnant with my second child. And when I got the pregnancy test and I took it, and I share this story in the book,
Yes.
When it was positive, and I was crawling on the floor. I was so nauseous. And when I took the pregnancy test, something in me erupted with more joy than I can physically explain to anyone. But I leapt in the air. And I remember going, what was that? Where did that come from? And so my son was born, and he was developing perfectly. And then when he was 8 months old, he received the DTP hip shot. And within 5 days, he started getting these little red freckles. And I didn't know what that was. And before that, by the way, just so everybody knows, he was developing perfectly. I have picture after picture after picture where he's just like the most enormous smiles. He was 100% on, all the charts. He was developing perfectly.
But wasn't there signs before you were pregnant or before you
Whenever,
were?
before I was,
Didn't they
before
do a
he,
blood test or
the
something that showed?
the alpha fetal protein test.
Hmm.
And what that showed was that, and this is one of those tests where they're basically testing the proteins that are occurring in, during pregnancy to make
Right.
sure the proteins are supposed to be at a certain level. So what it showed was that one of the proteins wasn't what it should have been. And what I actually think it was, which makes sense when you look at what happened, is I don't think he was producing enough glycoprotein. And what glycoprotein does, it's very important. It's actually an incredibly necessary protein for your immune system.
Hmm.
And what this protein does is it's basically the name tag, and it tells the rest of your cells what is self and what is foreign. So
Hmm.
if there's no name tag, then the immune system will attack it. And if there's not enough glycoprotein, or if the glycoprotein isn't operating properly, then it can't protect, it can't label the self, the parts of the body that are self, so that the immune system will not attack it.
Now, Katie, did anyone at that point say, "We don't know if you should keep this baby,"
I
or was
I
that just a
had
choice that was going?
the doctor never said that ever.
Okay.
The My ex stepmother, because at that point my
Uh,
father had finally divorced her, she had called literally right in that moment where I was, the doctor had said, there's this test. And I said, and I was in shock. And she said, oh, you should get rid of this baby to protect your quality of life.
oh wow.
And that was, to me, that's exactly who she was. Right. But it was such an absolutely disgusting thought to me.
Hmm.
How on earth could I possibly take the life of another human being for my own life? Like it just, of course, that's the opposite of what a parent does. The
Hmm.
parent dies to self for their child. That's what you do as a parent. And so I didn't know what was going to happen. And so we did the genetic testing. They're like, there's nothing wrong. We can't find
Hmm.
anything. Which that's the thing, is it wasn't a gene. It's just
Right.
literally, it was like there weren't enough proteins being formed, for that particular piece. And the reason why I do think that is what it is because of what happened when he got the DTP hip shot, which was, he started breaking out in these little red freckles, and then he became covered in them. And I was like, what is this? Oh, it must be a rash, right? Like a little baby gets a rash. So I called the doctor, and it was a Saturday morning, and they immediately had me come into the office. The doctor took one look at him, walked out of the room, walked back in, and said, I've already had him admitted to the hospital. Would you like an ambulance? And I was like, well, what? For what? Why? And all he would say is, we need to run tests. And so we go to the hospital. A hematologist met us there. And she said, your son either has leukemia or immune thrombocytopenic purpura. And I didn't know what immune thrombocytopenic purpura was. I knew what leukemia was, and I didn't want that. It turns out I didn't want the other one either. because what that is it's an autoimmune disease where your body starts killing off your own blood platelets and you can bleed to death internally. Unfortunately, without that, if your body's not producing enough glycoprotein, or if your immune system is not functioning in a way that it should, and your body reacts with a cytokine storm. And what people should know is a cytokine storm is basically when the immune system starts going off without any restrictions. So we have these
They talked
like
about that during COVID
mhm. Yeah,
a
like the
lot.
repressors and the program, yes, and the processors. So, and they're basically kind of working like this to modulate. So it's your
Mm.
body's constantly either triggering or controlling. And that's just this function of basically sensing what the threat is and then adjusting the body's reaction to appropriately address the threat. With the cytokine storm, there's no control. The body's full on attacking everything. And what that does is it causes massive cellular damage across the entire body. In particular, it causes encephalopathy, which is inflammation in the brain. And that is what inhibits and prevents the neural development of motor and integration of sensory, which ultimately is what Houston has. What we didn't know when he was a baby was, I mean, when the hematologist came back, she said, it's immune thrombocytopenic purpura. And she didn't even hesitate. She goes, this is a vaccine injury. And I didn't know what that meant. I thought if there's an injury, then you fix it. Like that's what you do, right? Okay, like if you break your arm, then you fix the arm and you let the arm
Right.
heal. I just thought when they were giving him the gamma globulin and everything else, I thought that would fix the injury. What I didn't understand was how that injury can interrupt the development of neural pathways. And the other thing is it causes autoimmune encephalopathy causes demyelination in the brain. And these were things I didn't know back then.
Hmm.
But what that does is it demyelinates the neural pathways that already exist. And they
Destroys
can
them.
actually, yes. And it basically, you can see these on brain scans. And this is what these parents are describing when they talk about regression, is what's actually occurring is the demyelination in the brain.
So how old was he at this point? Uh,
He was 8 months old at that
eight
point.
months.
And
How
what
soon did it start manifesting itself in
the
behavior?
first thing I noticed was within a few weeks, and he suddenly couldn't play patty cake. And it was like he tried to clap and his hands got stuck and he couldn't
Mm.
get his hands together. What I didn't realize is that's inflammation, the midline is like he was losing the neural components that connect the two hemispheres. And then the second thing I noticed was he couldn't roll a ball to me, and that's motor initiation. The third thing I noticed was he started squinting and then doing this.
Hmm.
And that's where his auditory and visual processing were being distorted.
Yeah.
And all of that, just so everybody knows what that all of those things, when your brain is inflamed and the motor is demyelinated and then the auditory and visual processing becomes disturbed, what ends up happening is your vestibular system, which is your body's GPS, it basically stops functioning correctly. So at that point, they lose that connection to where their body is. And if you don't know where your body is, you can't operate it properly. It's like being
Mm.
cut off from the GPS and the navigation systems
Yeah.
of your own body.
And so the diagnosis comes back severe autism.
Well, the diagnosis
correct?
was still, it does, but it wasn't until after the MMR. And that was like the next set of shots was the MMR.
Oh,
And
okay.
I told the doctor, I said, I'm really concerned about getting more shots considering the reaction he had the last time. And the doctor said, "Oh, that was a fluke." That was the worst thing the doctor could have possibly said because it was clearly absolutely a complete lack of awareness about how the immune system functions.
Right.
And I don't say that with fault. I say that clearly they haven't been educated on that. And he made a medical recommendation that was catastrophic. And after the MMR, that's when it got really, really bad. That's when he started getting the giant rashes, the sleeplessness, the screaming, the complete lack of control over his body, the running to water, the getting naked, the chronic diarrhea, the sores all over his body. It was after the MMR. So it definitely started at the DTP hip, but the MMR made it so much worse.
Hmm. Now you're into this, and he stops looking at you. He
Yes.
stops communicating, but he's running all over. You talk about one time when you had to lock the doors, and he got outside one time and ran and got hit by a truck.
Yes, he did.
So his body would just, you call these in the book, it's called stimming. He calls them stimming too.
Yes, he
What
does.
is stimming? Is that when you,
Stimming is, it's basically, think of the word stimulation.
okay.
So it's an overexertion of trying to seek stimulation. And for example, if you felt like like your brain or your body wasn't really working, you would get up, you would move, right? You would do something, you would, or like, let's say you were falling asleep while you were driving. Well, you would be like, okay, I need to move. I need to like clap my hands. I need to roll down the window. I need to get some stimulation. Well, what he's doing is he's using stimulation, sensory input, but in a way that is so addictive. He's using the actual sensory input as a drug. And that's
Uh,
really the best way to describe it.
It's like he gets joy. That's the only way, because, and let me try and I'm such an amateur at this, so just bear with me.
Oh, you're fine. You're doing
But
great.
I'm thinking these things through, Katie. But I'm thinking we need, as human beings, we need to communicate. Words
Yes.
are our food. God's word is our food. Words to each other. He wants to communicate with you.
Yes.
He wants to say things. He's hearing things. He's getting input, but he can't give anything back. And
Correct.
so so to get any kind of joy and satisfaction, his body has to go crazy. He has to run
Yes.
around, jump around, do things.
And also to even feel his body, he has to do, he has to physically input, sensory input into his body just to feel where his body is. This is why he would keep running to water and throwing himself into water. It's because he couldn't feel where his body was. And
Wow.
when he would throw himself into water, that's where he would feel where he was in space.
And this is
And
where, is this true for most severely autistic people?
yes.
Okay.
And the way, so whenever this cytokine storm goes off in the body, um, it goes off uniquely in each person. And there's no way to control how that cytokine storm occurs and what parts of the body it attacks and destroys, which is why you find some that are sensory seekers and others that might be sensory averse. And then you'll also find some that seek one sense sensory input, but then they're averse to another sensory input. So it's basically, it goes off like a bomb, and which is why every single one of them is so unique,
Mm,
because they're dealing with a different set of injuries and a
mm.
different set of neural processing and audit and sensory processing issues.
Now, let's go back to you have Houston, and you have 5 kids.
I do. And people are like, why did you keep having children? And I'm
I asked you
like,
that when I called
yeah,
you, remember?
yeah,
That
I
was the
do.
first thing
And
I asked.
um, so I think first people have to understand that I didn't have any other options. There was that. I was stuck in this extremely abusive, unfaithful marriage. But I was also by the time I had gotten married, I was really trying to live in the Lord. I was trying to live a godly life. So all of my thoughts were of, staying with the person that you're married to, and having a whole family unit, and forgiving your enemy, praying for your enemy, blessing your enemy, um, turning your cheek, like all of those biblical principles that are taught. I wasn't, these weren't foreign, like, ideas that you just read about and go, oh, I'll be nice if somebody cuts me off in traffic. This was an actual physical life that I was living, trying to be kind to the person who was being unfaithful and abusing us. And that was, I thought I was honoring God by doing
What
that.
was there also a feeling of you mentioned how much you loved having children. You loved your
I
children. And
I
your whole
do.
life
Yeah.
was in the children. So
Yes.
the more I have, the more I'm insulating myself from this guy.
I definitely lived for them.
Yeah.
For sure I was living for them. By the time I had my fourth, though, Houston's autism was in full, like when you talked about him getting hit by the car, my fourth child was 6 weeks old when he was hit by
Mhm.
the car, and Houston was 3. And so, it was that blur, because Houston wouldn't sleep either. And so, whenever I became pregnant with my fourth, I was completely in a blur. I was months pregnant before I even realized I was pregnant. And so, whenever I finally, when I had him, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I can't do this. I cannot do this anymore. Right after that, Houston was hit by the truck. And what is required to care for someone with severe autism is every single second of your life.
And you
There
were
is
doing it
no
alone.
alone with while being harassed and abused. And my other children, they were little. They were super little. So I wasn't even thinking about myself. I was just thinking about trying to take care of these babies. And so I convinced my husband at the time to have a vasectomy, because I was like, someone has to stop the madness. And I found out I was pregnant on the Monday before his Wednesday appointment. And he was thrilled, because he was like, oh, great. Now I don't have to, have a vasectomy. And I was absolutely destroyed. And I went to my doctor and I said, I want my tubes tied. I want a tubal ligation. And he was like, you can't, you're so young. And I'm like, you don't understand what's going on. Like,
I
you
know.
have
I'm
no
like, really?
idea. So, so I did make an effort to stop it. It's just the set of events was so in such a time of chaos that I wasn't, this wasn't family planning. This was family implosion, explosion. It was just,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. And
I get
so
it.
I, I did, and whenever I found out I was pregnant with my fifth, and I talk about this in the book, I was absolutely devastated. Um, Not because I knew I would love him. I knew I would absolutely adore him. And I also knew it would take everything out of me
Mm.
and there would be nothing left of me. And at that point, I was in such a state of barely surviving that I couldn't imagine how I would keep surviving. And I saw my children as, yes, you die to yourself and you live for your kids. Yes, that's what you do as a parent. But the cost was so much higher than what I had thought it would be.
Mm.
And it cost everything. And there was nothing left for me.
And you
Nothing.
felt that at this point with you in Houston, it was, did you even think that there was someone, did you even look at him and think that there was someone in there who knew what you were doing for him and loving him? And or was it just so hopeless that you looked and said, he doesn't even know what I'm doing. He
Yeah,
can't give me any love.
Giving up hope is an incredibly difficult thing to do, especially giving up hope on your child.
Yeah.
And so I spent years pouring into a child who gave me nothing back. And of course, you don't sit there and go, there's nothing in there, because you wouldn't be trying if you thought there was
Right.
no one in
Right.
there. I was just believing and hoping and praying and desperately pleading for something that I was doing to work. I wanted it to work. I wanted my child back because I knew he was there and then he was taken from us. And there's a quote that I use from a father who said that severe autism is like someone comes in the night and steals your child and leaves a bewildered body.
Mm.
And that's what it felt like, is that this child was like, the body was still there, but it was a disaster. But where did my child go? Where was he? What had happened? Where was he? Because he used to be there. And so you're just like, you're pouring all this hope, but the more and more you do it, the more the experts tell you it's a waste of time.
They do? And
Yes,
how long?
they do.
This went on for 2 decades, correct?
Yes. Yes.
For
And there
2
were,
decades. That's such a long time, Katie.
I know.
I mean,
Oh, I agree. I totally agree. I'm at 3 now. Like, he's 29, so like, it's a really one of my good friends called me yesterday, and she's caregiving for her mom in her 90s, and she was just talking about, she's like, this is so difficult,
Yeah.
to care for someone who needs everything. She goes, but I keep thinking of you. So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm glad I could, provide some perspective.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a difference between now. At least
Yes.
your
Oh, for
son's
sure.
in there.
I know he's in there. The
And
caregiving is still very much present,
yes,
but I
yes,
don't
yes,
have
yes, yes.
I don't have the hopelessness. And that's what's so difficult. And what I hope people understand is that when I finally let what the experts told me, which was, if you haven't given up hope, you need to, that was the message.
Just
It
let him
took,
go.
just let it go.
What
Give
if
up.
you'd have done that? Can
We
can
would
you
not
even
be
imagine?
talking.
Yeah, we would not be talking, that's for
Yeah.
sure. But the other part is that you wouldn't have discovered this incredible gift of God that is inside this body. Now, I want to skip. I want to skip forward a little bit, if we can, if you don't mind.
Of course.
How did you get to the point where people were telling you, give up,
Yes.
nothing's going to get better. It is what it is. He's not there. He's just his body. But you kept pushing. When did it turn?
The very first moment of hope shifting, because that's what shifted, was hope.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand where I was, which was hopelessness. without hope. I had accepted the fate of hopelessness. This was the miserable life I had been given, and my job was to keep us all alive. That was
Mm.
all I could do.
Mm.
There was no there I couldn't even put any other expectation on myself, because that
No
was at
joy,
this
no nothing.
no joy. And at this point I had left my abusive husband, and he was doing his best to make our lives a living hell, and he was quite successful. And he was corrupting my children in the process, my other kids, and I was just trying to pay the next rent, get food on the table, get everybody to school. I had given up all dreams of anything, and it was just survival. Um, and that it's a very hopeless place to be in for you. You know, I understand people have periods of depression. It's an incredibly difficult place to find as your permanent place of being.
Mm.
And but that's where I was. And at the time I was working 3 jobs, and one of the things I was having to do, because I worked as I was needing to get my yoga certification. So I was working at a gym, and they wanted me to teach yoga. And so I needed to take this yoga certification as well. But I was also working 3 jobs. So it was just a disaster. Um, and in this one particular session, for the yoga certification, we were supposed to set an intention. And I was like, good grief, this is ridiculous. I was rolling my eyes. I was the very last person to go. And I had also become quite cynical towards other people in general. And I knew that people don't care. They just care about themselves. They're not caring
Hmm.
about your life, or, and they definitely don't want to hear about it, because they don't want to have to feel somebody else's pain. That
Right.
is a pain, right? And so when it got to me, I told myself, say as little about your life as possible, be very generic. That was what I had said internally. So I made this little general intention that was vague. It didn't say anything. And I said it. And then without being able to stop myself, what came out was, oh, and I would like bad things to stop happening. And they had the audacity to challenge me on that statement. And I was like, okay, you haven't lived what I've lived, right? Like, that's quite bold of you to challenge um my cynicism when you haven't lived my life.
Right.
And they said, why would you say that? And I said, well, I know all about belief. I said, you believe what you've experienced. That's what I've experienced. Why would I believe anything else? And they said that good had just as much chance of happening as bad. And I was like, whatever.
Well, when
Like,
is it going to happen?
yeah. And so I didn't, I thought that was a ridiculous statement, because to me it seemed obvious that you develop an expectation based on what you've experienced. I
Right.
mean, that's what most of us do.
Right.
And she was sitting there asking me to believe something I haven't experienced and expect that instead, which seemed an enormous stretch for my imagination at the time. And she gave me some articles, and one of them in particular had a huge impact on me. And that was, she said, look at everything around you. Look at the chair, look at the table, look at the fork, the pencil. She said, what are these things? What are these things you think are what's real? Like we do. We think the table is what's real,
Yes.
or the chair is what's real. And she said, but ask yourself this question: what was that table or chair before it was a table or a chair? And I'm puzzled by the riddle. And you know, and it's funny, whenever I ask people that question, they immediately go, it was wood. It
It was
was,
a tree.
they go to the material. And she said it was a thought.
Mhm.
And I was like, wait a second, that's that's true. That is true. And then the second question she said was, now if no one had ever had that thought, would that table or chair exist? And it wouldn't.
Mhm.
If no one had ever thought of a chair, there would be no chairs.
Mhm.
Every single thing that we have around us is the product of a thought. But we think that the only thing that is real is the material object. But
Mhm.
really, the thought is the actual spark that creates the physical being, the physical product. And at the time, I was not at this place, but what that is the recognition that spirit is the source of everything, that all things come from spirit, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning.
Mhm.
All things were made through him. Without him, nothing that exists is.
Mhm.
Everything comes from him. And you're like, right now, there's like scientists who are like, they're creating life. No, they're taking something that God already created. They are manufacturing all of these environmental conditions to try to create the conditions necessary for these elements to interact and become something living. No one spoke life into existence except God. There is
Mhm.
no one but God. He
Mhm.
is the only creator. There is no one besides him.
So at that point, you started to get hope. There was
I,
a
well,
there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
it made logical sense, is where I was. And I
Okay.
couldn't get past the logic of it. I knew it was true. Like, logically, I knew that this absolutely was like how matter comes into being. It just
Yes.
is.
And so it
And so
started
I was
bringing
like,
you back to God.
it did. It did. And this is at a point where I'm like, I haven't shunned God. I still love God, but I feel like God has forgotten me. I feel
Uh,
abandoned by him.
mhm.
And anyone in my position would understand
Yes.
why I felt that.
Yes.
And it was not it wasn't an illogical thought to feel God's absence in those
Not at all.
experiences. I was in this space of thinking about the idea that good had just as much chance of happening as bad. That was where I was. I was like, okay, my thoughts might actually have some play a role in this. I was like, okay, it was a lot. And I remember telling a friend, and she said, but Katie, how on earth could you possibly hope? Look at your life. And she was right. And I said, I don't know, but my thoughts have have importance and they have power, and I want to change them. And that was really like I was at the place where I did want to actively change my thoughts. And what happened was it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I came home from working one of my three jobs. I was waiting tables at a pizzeria in my upper 30s, guys. Like, this was not exactly the highlight of my career. Um, you know,
You're
I was
amazing.
working with teenagers. I was like all the potheads and the mom. That's where that was literally my life.
Oh, that's funny.
And so I came home and I laid down on the couch. One of my kids was playing video games, and Houston at this time is 17, and he jumps all the time. He flaps his hands, he rocks back and forth, he makes huge booming noises, he stems on Disney videos all day long. The only thing that comes out of his mouth is like, coming to video in 1998, coming to video in 1998. That's the only, it's just all these scripting, right? There's no communication at all.
Mm.
And he came downstairs, and I had laid down on the couch and pulled the blanket up, and I was trying to sleep, but my body was so exhausted. I was just vibrating almost. And he sat at my feet. And that was totally unusual because he never spent time with us. He never sat still. He wasn't flapping his hands or making the booming noises or rocking back and forth or scripting. It was just sitting still like a calm human being. And suddenly he reached over with perfect intentionality and he tugged at the blanket just like you would to get someone's attention. And I was shocked and I opened my eyes and there he was looking directly into my eyes.
And he never did that.
He had never done that before, ever, except when he was an infant. And he's looking directly into my eyes and he says, "Mama, I love you." And when you've waited 17 years to hear your child say your name and tell you that they love you, well, there was only one thing I could do. I could keep believing in the disaster that was my life, or I could believe in a miracle. And that's when I chose to believe. And that's when hope began.
Wow. Katie, that's an unbelievable story. We are going to. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you have come into my life, and now the life of everybody who watches this. We're going to continue with the second part of this story, and this is how you discover Houston inside of that body.
Mm-hmm.
And how Houston then tells his story. And one of the things that I love about it, and we'll get into this, is the way he conveys to you how grateful he is for you and how much he loves you.
Yeah.
And all those years that you thought you weren't making any impact, you were the rock of his life and are. And I love you. I can't wait to continue
Thank
this
you.
story, and we'll continue. You'll hear the second part when our podcast continues. Stay tuned.